Okay. Parshas Yitro. This Dvar Torah is being given in memory of my grandmother, Yitta Bas Reb Moshe, whose yortzeit is this Shabbos Kodesh, 20 of Shvat. Okay. Yisro remains one of the more elusive people in the Torah. What do we really know about Yisro? Well, Moshe runs away from Egypt after committing a murder, helps his daughter Tzipporah by the well. Yisro is disturbed that Tzipporah doesn't invite Moshe over. Tzipporah invites Moshe over, the Mitzri she calls him, and Yisro proposes a shidduch, and they get married. It's all not the way it appears to be, maybe. Moshe is a fugitive. What does Yisro know about Moshe? I'll answer that in a moment. Yisro, would you want to make a shidduch with one of the high priest's daughters of some religion? So it's highly questionable. Why, how? All right. The answer is always, it's B'yad Hashem. But we could ask the question, and we have to try to understand this. Maybe Vayishma Yisro, Kohen Midyan, Chosein Moshe, that Yisro heard what happened when he was Kohen, when he was the high priest, and then eventually he transitioned to be Chosein Moshe, Moshe's father-in-law. There's all kinds of explanations, but on the face of it, it doesn't appear to be the best shidduch. Not for Yisro, because Moshe's wanted. Now, what I referred to before, Yisro, the Medrash tells us, was one of Paro's advisors. That means that Yisro, Kohen Midyan, and we'll talk about Midyan in a second, he was in the palace. He was in the court of Paro. He must have bumped into Moshe. He must have known about Moshe. In fact, Paro must have known about Moshe because all of a sudden his daughter brings home a baby. Mi huzeh? Who is this child? The Torah Shebechtav doesn't go into it, and it leaves it open. And there's a lot of Mefarshim that just stay away from it. So this requires more study. Midyan, by the way, is the child, the son of Abraham's third wife, Keturah. So he's a problem, Midyan. The Midianites and the Bnei Yisrael were always pretty much at war. Midyan today would be considered Saudi Arabia, and maybe some parts of Saudi Arabia that are adjacent to the country. So Midyan was a big place. Yisro was a big person. He was advisor to the king. He was a high priest. He didn't know about Moshe. He didn't know the stories with the daughter, with Moshe slaying the Russia. So these are all questions that require more learning, deeper learning, and it's not easily available. Anyway, by Yishma Yisro Kohen Midyan, that God took the Jews out of Mitzrayim. But as Kol Asher Asa Elohim LaMoshe Uli Yisrael Amo Ki Yotzi Adonai Yisrael MiMitzrayim. And then he comes to Moshe's camp. And when he sees Moshe, he says to him after they kiss, Vayishak lo, they asked, Vayishalu ish l'reyehu l'shalom, Vayovo ha'ohela. Ha'ohela is the ohel. Now that has a lot of symbolic significance. Oel Moed, Oel Hashem, Oel Habris. Yisro entered officially into the Dalet Amos of Bnei Yisrael, and he, at some point of this meeting, probably converts. He, his sons, his wife, Even though they're Midianites, they convert. This is big news in this time period. Can you imagine if one of the major officials in Rome, you know who I'm referring to, gets up one morning and says, I'm becoming Jewish. The whole world would get rattled. And what does Yisro say first? He coins an expression that we have used for thousands of years, millions of times. It begins, Vayomar Yisro, Baruch Hashem. Blessed is God, Asher Hitzil Etchem Miyad Mitzrayim. Blessed is God who saved you from Egypt. So Yisro is the author. He coined the expression Baruch Hashem, which till this very second I'm using. So he serves as a memory to that unbelievable expression and to conversion, to Gerut. He comes as he comes as Kohen Midian, and then he's referred to as Chosein Moshe. That, we see, is the purpose for the Shidduch. Yisro served as an example par excellence for the Gerim. He's a Ger Tzedek. Now there's a problem. The father-in-law comes, he sees what's going on. Moshe is very, very busy. He's wiped out. People come to him all day with shaylas, and this guy stole this, and this is mine, and this is his. And Moshe is sitting there all day answering questions, trying to give halachas. And Yisro, the caring father-in-law, says, Moshe, you're going to burn out. Okay? So he suggests to him a court system. And, for important, less important, minor, and Moshe, Vayishma Moshe. So we have two people where the Torah uses the word Vayishma, and as a result of Vayishma, they take action, they do something positive. Vayishma Yisro, he heard what was going on. Then later on, Vayishma Moshe listened to Yisro's advice, and that served as the role model for the court system in Israel, and eventually the Sanhedrin. So Yisro, although he's very hard to figure out, although we don't know that much about him, we do know that he made some major contribution. One of the most inspiring, that's the only word I could use, places in Eretz Yisrael is the kever of Yisro, which is outside the holy city of Tveria, about 10-minute ride if you don't get lost. And according to Jewish tradition, and I have it here in Sefer HaKadmonim, okay, this is the kever of Yisro, if you could zoom in and see it closer. It is considered a holy place by the Jews and by the Druze, Jews and Druze, right? And it's the Vad lehatzolat kivrei kadmonim. Now there are two, as usual, at least two opinions. The Druze hold that inside this mosque, and remember, Yisro is their prophet; he's not a god, so this is not considered avodah zarah. Okay. Yisro is the prophet, the Navi for the Druze. They consider it his burial place, and there's a tomb there. And there's also an imprint of a foot that's encased in ancient glass. And the Druze come there, and they mark this as a holy place. There is also a shita that this footprint was made by Tzipora, an imprint of Moshe's foot, his ankle, and his entire foot. I mean, he had a nice sized foot, and this is the footprint of Moshe. Tzipora, his wife, brought it to Israel so that at least Moshe would have, as the expression goes, a foot in the land. so that Moshe made an appearance possibly into Eretz Yisrael. It depends. It's considered Yisro. Some consider it Moshe, but nevertheless it's considered a Makom Kodesh, a holy place. Yisro and his descendants become Gerei Tzedek, at least the first few generations or so, until they start up with war again against Israel. So this is just the amazing thing of living in Eretz Yisrael, is that we're all here at the same time. What do I mean by that? Rambam says Hashem lives in the past, the present, and the future. Time is in one sphere to him. Here, as Jews, we also live in this one dimension. The past, the present, the future. We're all living it every day. We're together with Yisro, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Rachel, Rivka, Leah, Sarah, Avraham. Okay, then we have our current Gedolim, our current population, and we live for the future. We live into the future. So we're also in this one dimension, three dimensions. That's one of the beautiful things here. You're in contact. You see, you feel, you hear the Kadmonim, the generations that preceded us. Shabbat Shalom, Shalom al Yisrael, and Briut.